Welcome back to Sunrise. Now, while May ushers in both celebration and reflection with a recognition of Child Month and Mother's Day, for many parents, this time can evoke deep sorrow, especially for those grappling with the loss of a child. This morning at Parents Happy Hour table, we're joined by author Lorraine Jones Lawrence as she shares her recent publication, You Gotta Get Up: Surviving the Loss of Your Child. Lorraine's book is more than just words on a page. It's a guiding beacon through the darkness of grief, offering practical support and a glimmer of hope for those navigating this challenging journey. Welcome to Sunrise, Lorraine.
Good morning, Lorraine.
Thank you so much for being here with us. It's unimaginable losing your child, and none of us can ever really understand that the way someone who has gone through it has. And I know there are many people watching here today who can completely identify, and I just want to know if you can just take us through a bit of the process of grief. What is grief? What was your journey with grief? How do you get through this?
Okay, it's ironic in the sense that I had been working in bereavement support for years before maybe 10 years before my son died. But it was from the perspective of helping children who had lost parents, yes, because my brother had been killed, I think, 1993, and he had left children behind. And whereas we found that there was support for the adults, grieving, we could help each other, we could comfort each other, we could, find a support group or whatever. But there was nothing for the children, and we didn't understand how to support them. So I really started looking into that, and then I got training in that area, and I was hosting workshops over the years on that issue. And then my son died, so I was now on the other end of, when he was killed. And so it was weird because I knew in theory, but it still doesn't help the pain, and you still have to do that, and it's a different kind of, situation. So yeah, I had a rough 2 years. Immediately after, I went back to work like the day after the funeral because I was going to be so tough, and I know this, I know grief. And then it hit, it just kind of, and so within about a year and a half, I said, no, I had to mark this. I can't just go on as if, life goes on. Yeah. So I quit my job and took about 2.5 years just doing what I wanted to do, and trying to understand why I was still here and my child wasn't. So I did a lot of reading and, journaling and all that kind of thing, just trying to. So it was quite a journey and very intense because I really needed to feel and understand what was happening, what was happening.
You say a couple of things that really stand out to me. It's the theory of it versus the actual practical of it. It's also the feelings that you feel versus working through your thoughts around it. And while grief looks different for every single person, in hearing you say those things, they strike a chord with me. Because I would have been a recipient of your guidance prior to losing your son. The support that you would have been offering, I would have been more than open to receiving it. But Tami and I, in speaking about this before, we both said to each other, this is in fact our greatest fear.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And so, as I hear you reference the practical and the thought process over the versus the feelings, can you walk us, if at all possible, through getting the information that you lost your son, processing and preparing to give your son a send-off to even where you are today? Walk us through the grieving process.
Okay, well, it was just a a normal Friday evening.
Yeah.
And my husband and I were watching TV, and the phone rang, and it was a friend of my son who called to say that he was in hospital. He had been in a fight with another young man, and he had been stabbed, so they were treating him. So we jump up and we rush to get to the hospital, and the car wouldn't start. So and then when we finally get there in the Friday evening traffic, and we get, you know, the nurse, you know, the look they give you, and then you know, I'm looking at her, and she's trying to say all kinds of stuff, and it's not coming through. It's really not coming through. I see his girlfriend there crying, and it's just not registering. And then, you know, they tell me, and the feeling is, I guess, if you holler long enough, it will be not true.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So that was you know, that was it. I you know, was totally, but then shock tripped in, which is, I think, you know, nature's way of.
Yeah.
So I was at the hospital, and I was like totally, you know, done. And then I went home, and there were some friends who came by, and, you know, for some reason, like there was something funny, and I ended up laughing. And then I realized, you know, later on that this is what it is. It's the protection, you know, so protection trips in, or else I think you just couldn't, you know, your brain just couldn't process all of that at the same time. So, and that in a way took me through the days up to the funeral and the planning of the funeral. It's as if I had gone into a room in my head, and it was kind of protecting me from, you know, what was the reality of what was happening. And so I could get through the funeral, and I could get through, as I said, I went back to work. I started working the next day, and I think one of the things that I didn't want was for people to start tiptoeing around me and not knowing what to say. So I went back, and I was as normal could be. And then one day, one of my colleagues looked at me, and he said, "Lorraine, you know, I love you dearly, but this is not normal." And true enough, in about 3 months, I was in the doctor's office. My blood pressure had gone through it was actually my son's birthday, I think. And I was a mess, you know? And so, yes, so I realized that no matter how much you think you know grief.
Is that some of what you share in when you've got to get up? When you wrote this book, was this I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this because I have to help someone else project?
Yes, it's what I realize. It's like this happens to you, and it's like you're I always said, if I lose my child, I'll just sit down and die. That's what I always said. I just didn't know how I'd get up again. And so for me, for every time I hear of a parent who has lost a child, I think of them sitting like by the side of a road, and there's this big unknown ahead of them, you know, and you really need somebody who's been, because that was what helped me, knowing parents who had lost children and seeing that they had come back and you know, come back to life, and they, you know, so I felt like, you know, there really should be somebody at this point to say to you, listen, you know, there's something, there's life on the other side. And even though I can't tell you exactly how your roads will go, I can at least show you some of the signposts and, you know, and what to expect. Because the biggest fear of any griever, if you've lost someone really close, is that you're going crazy. And so, you know, I go into, these are some of the symptoms of grief, and it's fine, you know, and then there's times if, you know, where I say, well, if this is becoming a problem, then maybe you should look at getting professional,
help.
yes,
Right.
professional help. Yeah.
Are there any resources that people can go to if they find themselves in this position? Anywhere anybody can check online? Are there support groups?
Okay, there are, I think Swallowfield Church Chapel, I know has a group going now, and places like Choose Life, Choose Life International, Dr. Thomas, the Dr. Thomas's, and Whole Life Ministries. Is it? There are places that can.
Okay.
There are unfortunately not enough support groups, but then what I did for the book was I looked at online resources, and there's some online groups now.
Great.
You know that.
Where can persons get a hold of your book?
All right, it's available on Amazon, and it's also, if persons are buying like, you know, more than say 5 or so copies, then my website, Survivors Unlimited, they can order there.
Great. Thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you so much for being here with us. I always admire women like you who are so brave to share after unimaginable loss. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me.
appreciate it.
I really appreciate you.
Awesome.
Our special guest this morning was Lorraine Jones Lawrence, author of You've Gotta Get Up, Surviving the Loss of Your Child. On the other side of the break, we're gearing up for cricket, lovely cricket, with the ICC T20 World Cup. Please stick and stay. Very brave.
Thank you so much.
So nice to meet you.